Do you really think Kuchisake Onna is just another Japanese urban legend? A simple ghost story told to frighten children? What if I told you that beneath the well-known tale of the Slit-Mouthed Woman lies a horrifying truth that has been systematically erased from official records for over 3 centuries? The story you think you know is merely the surface, a sanitized version designed to distance us from a reality far more disturbing than fiction. Tonight, I'm going to reveal what historians, folklorists, and government officials have worked tirelessly to conceal. The true origin of Kuchisake Onna isn't just a tale of supernatural horror, it's a documented phenomenon that continues to this day. They don't want you to know this. After you finish watching, you'll understand why. It begins in Edo period Japan, specifically in the remote village of Kurihara in 1656. Official provincial records from the time, documents now stored in a climate-controlled archive beneath Tokyo's National Museum, contain unusual reports of a woman found wandering the forest paths surrounding the village. These accounts describe her as wearing a kimono stained with blood, her face covered by a cloth mask common among the sick during that era. What makes these documents significant isn't just their content, but the fact that they were deliberately separated from other records of the period and sealed under direct order of the regional daimyo. The woman was eventually captured by village guards. When they removed her mask, they discovered her face had been mutilated, her mouth sliced open from ear to ear in a grotesque parody of a smile. According to witness testimony preserved in these documents, the woman appeared confused, repeatedly asking those around her, "Am I beautiful?" in a voice barely above a whisper. Here's where official history diverges sharply from truth. The woman wasn't killed or driven away as most modern versions of the legend suggest. Instead, she was confined to a small hut at the village's edge where a local healer attempted to treat her wounds. For 3 days, nothing unusual occurred. On the 4th night, the guards posted outside her hut reported hearing whispers despite the woman being alone inside. By morning, both guards were found dead. Their faces had been cut in identical fashion to the woman's. She had vanished. What followed was the first documented Kuchisake Onna incident. 7 villagers disappeared over the next month. 3 were eventually found, their faces mutilated, their bodies abandoned in precise, unnatural positions at the forest's edge. The remaining 4 were never seen again. No blood was ever found at the scenes, no signs of struggle, just silence. The village headman sent urgent messages to neighboring provinces requesting assistance. Only one response arrived, an envoy from the daimyo himself, accompanied by 3 Shinto priests and a Buddhist monk. This unusual grouping suggests authorities already understood they weren't dealing with an ordinary murderer. The envoy ordered the village sealed. No one in, no one out. What happened during the next 7 days was documented in a journal kept by one of the priests, a text that was discovered in 1972 during the renovation of an ancient shrine in Miyagi Prefecture, only to disappear from the university archive where it was being studied just 3 weeks later. Before its disappearance, however, researcher Takashi Matsumoto made partial transcriptions, fragments of which survived in his private papers after his sudden death in 1973. These transcriptions described the methodical cleansing rituals performed at each location where bodies had been found. They detailed the special talismans created using techniques that combined elements from multiple religious traditions, an unusual practice that indicates the severity of the threat. Most significantly, they document the discovery of the woman's true identity. She had been the wife of a samurai, punished by her husband for alleged infidelity. He had cut her face as both punishment and permanent mark of shame. But the document suggests something else happened during this act of violence, something the priests called a hungry spirit finding its vessel. The specific terminology used in the text suggests they believed not that the woman was possessed after her mutilation, but that something was invited in through the act of ritualistic violence itself. The priest's journal ends abruptly, but provincial records indicate the village of Kurihara was burned to the ground in the winter of 1657. Official documents claim this was due to a cooking fire that spread during strong winds. However, Adjacent records from neighboring villages mention a decree forbidding anyone from settling in the area for the next 50 years. The land was declared cursed. The incident might have remained isolated, forgotten to history, if not for what happened in 1711 in Kanazawa, over 400 kilometers from the original site. A woman with a surgical mask-like covering was reported approaching children walking home from school, asking them if they thought she was beautiful. Those who said yes were found with their mouths cut open. Those who said no were discovered bisected at the waist. 7 children vanished entirely. These incidents established the pattern we now recognize in the modern legend. But they weren't legends then, they were criminal investigations. Documents from the Kanazawa magistrate's office, dated 1711, detail the search for the woman responsible. They note with particular concern that witnesses described the woman differently, some claiming she was young and beautiful behind her mask, others insisting she was elderly with rotting teeth. The only consistency was the question she asked and what lay beneath her mask. The incident stopped as suddenly as they began. The magistrate's final report includes a curious note. The woman was not found, but has perhaps found what she sought. The case was closed, the documents sealed. For nearly a century, there were no recorded incidents matching the pattern. Then, in 1803, 3 separate occurrences were documented across Japan, in Edo, now Tokyo, in Kyoto, and in a small fishing village in Hokkaido. All 3 followed the identical pattern. A masked woman, the same question, mutilated victims. In each location, authorities connected the incidents to local women who had recently suffered facial disfigurement through accident, disease, or violence. This is a crucial detail. Whatever entity or phenomenon we're discussing, it appears to require a human host with specific characteristics. The pattern suggests not a single immortal being, but something that transfers, something that finds new vessels when necessary. During Japan's rapid modernization in the Meiji period, reports became more sporadic but didn't cease entirely. An 1862 police report from Yokohama describes the discovery of 4 foreign sailors found near the docks, their faces mutilated in the now familiar pattern. A British diplomatic dispatch mentions the incident obliquely, noting that local authorities attributed the violence to superstitious causes not worthy of serious inquiry. The condescending tone is typical of colonial attitudes of the time, but what's notable is that Japanese officials apparently provided some explanation connected to local folklore, suggesting the phenomenon was known well enough to be referenced. The most significant documented case from this period occurred in 1895 in Nagasaki. Hospital records detail the admission of a woman with severe facial burns from a household accident involving cooking oil. 3 nights after her admission, 4 patients and 2 nurses on the same floor were found with their faces sliced open. The woman had vanished. Hospital director Kenji Watanabe assembled a comprehensive report, including interviews with witnesses who had spoken with the woman before the incidents. Each reported being asked if they thought she was beautiful, despite her injuries. Watanabe's report was submitted to both medical authorities and the police. Within days, he was removed from his position. The hospital records regarding the incident were confiscated. When Watanabe attempted to speak publicly about the events, he was committed to a psychiatric facility in Kyoto, where he remained until his death 18 months later. This pattern of official suppression becomes increasingly evident as we move into the 20th century. During the pre-war period, Japan's government actively worked to modernize the country's image and discourage backward superstitions. Documentation from this era is sparse, but notable gaps and inconsistencies in police records from Tokyo, Osaka, and Kobe between 1912 and 1940 suggest selective removal of certain cases. What we do know comes primarily from newspaper articles that slipped through censorship and personal diaries that survived the period. These sources reference at least 11 distinct incidents matching the Kuchisake Onna pattern between 1918 and 1938. Each was quickly suppressed, attributed to mental illness, criminal gangs, or simply left unresolved. World War II and the subsequent American occupation created a temporary break in the pattern. There are no verified incidents during this period, though some researchers suggest this absence of evidence may itself be evidence of how thoroughly documentation was controlled by occupation authorities. Then came 1979, the most widely known Kuchisake Onna panic. What most people don't realize is that this wasn't simply mass hysteria or an urban legend suddenly gaining popularity. It began with a very real series of attacks in Gifu Prefecture. Police records, which were partially declassified in 2001 following a Freedom of Information request by journalist Haruki Shimada, confirm that between March and June of 1979, 11 children reported being approached by a woman wearing a surgical mask who asked if they thought she was beautiful. 3 of these children were later found with facial lacerations consistent with the historical pattern. 2 others disappeared entirely. The official investigation initially focused on a female patient recently discharged from a psychiatric facility in the area. This woman had facial scarring from a car accident 3 years earlier and frequently wore a surgical mask, common in Japan, but particularly useful for hiding her injuries. When police located and questioned her, they found no evidence linking her to the attacks. She had alibis for at least 2 of the incidents. The investigation continued for 7 weeks before being abruptly shut down by order of the prefectural government. The reason given was unnecessary public panic. By this point, however, media reports had already spread throughout Japan, triggering the nationwide fear that's now remembered as simply an urban legend revival. What's crucial to understand is how authorities transformed an active criminal investigation into folklore. Internal police memos from July 1979 explicitly instructed officers to refer to the incidents as unsubstantiated rumors when speaking to the press. Public statements by officials increasingly emphasized the psychological impact of scary stories on children rather than addressing the actual reported attacks. This deliberate reframing, turning crime into legend, follows the same pattern of suppression seen throughout the documented history of Kuchisake Onna incidents. It's a pattern that continues to this day. Between 1980 and 2000, Japanese police records contained 27 cases involving facial mutilations matching the historical pattern. Each was officially attributed to conventional explanations: gang violence, random attacks, mental illness. Yet, in 13 of these cases, witnesses reported being asked some variation of, "Am I beautiful?" before the attack. In 9 instances, the alleged attacker was described as wearing a surgical mask. In 5 cases, witnesses specifically mentioned the attacker revealing a mutilated mouth beneath the mask. The most recent documented incident that fits all the criteria occurred in Sapporo in October 2018. A university student reported being followed by a woman in a surgical mask as he walked home from campus around 11 p.m. The woman eventually called out to him, asking if he thought she was beautiful. When he turned and politely said yes, he later told police he assumed she was simply a socially awkward person seeking validation. She pulled down her mask to reveal what he described as a mouth cut open like in the stories. The student ran and managed to escape. When he reported the incident to police, they took his statement, but told him there was little they could do without more information. 2 nights later, another student from the same university disappeared while walking the same route. He was found 3 days later, in an abandoned building 2 kilometers away. His face had been mutilated, his mouth cut from ear to ear. Official reports attributed the attack to a copycat inspired by the urban legend. The case file notes that police identified a homeless woman with mental health issues known to frequent the area. She was briefly detained but released due to lack of evidence. The case remains technically open but inactive. What makes this incident particularly noteworthy is that police records, obtained through another Freedom of Information request filed by the victim's family, reveal that surveillance cameras along the route captured no footage of the student being followed, despite covering nearly the entire path he described. Furthermore, the building where he was found had been scheduled for demolition and was surrounded by temporary fencing with a single locked entrance. Construction workers who arrived on the morning the victim was discovered reported finding the lock intact. These inconsistencies weren't addressed in the official investigation. When the victim's family raised questions, they were told further inquiry would not be productive and might potentially encourage harmful superstitions. This brings us to perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the Kuchisake Onna phenomenon, the consistent pattern of official suppression and reframing that has persisted across centuries. From Edo period daimyo to modern police departments, authorities have systematically transformed evidence into folklore, not to protect the public from fear, but to protect them from something far worse: truth. Consider what we've established. For over 3 centuries, across geographically distant locations throughout Japan, incidents sharing specific detailed characteristics have been documented. A woman with facial disfigurement, the signature question; victims with mutilated faces, some who vanish entirely. The circumstances defy conventional explanation. Locked rooms entered. Without force, surveillance blind spots that shouldn't exist, perpetrators who are never found, or who seem to transfer their methods to new hosts. Each time, authorities follow the same playbook: initial investigation, unexplained abandonment of the case, reframing as superstition or legend, suppression of records, and occasionally, silencing of witnesses. This isn't how officials respond to ordinary crimes or even to mass hysteria. This is how they respond to something they understand but cannot control, something they believe the public is safer not knowing about. The pattern becomes even more evident when we examine how the Kuchisake Onna legend has been actively promoted as fiction in recent decades. Since the 1980s, the story has been featured in movies, manga, video games, and tourist attractions. What began as a series of actual incidents has been deliberately commercialized and fictionalized, the most effective way to hide truth in plain sight. Japanese cultural anthropologist Takashi Suzuki, before his unexplained disappearance in 2014, was researching this very aspect of the phenomenon. His unpublished manuscript, portions of which were shared with colleagues before he vanished, proposed that the deliberate fictionalization of Kuchisake Onna served a dual purpose. It discredited actual incidents by associating them with entertainment media, while simultaneously spreading awareness of the entity's pattern, potentially serving as a warning mechanism for those who might encounter it. Suzuki's research notes contain a disturbing hypothesis. After analyzing police reports and witness testimonies from multiple incidents across different time periods, he identified a potential pattern in victim selection. Those who encountered the entity and survived typically responded to the "Am I beautiful?" question with specific types of answers, neither a simple yes nor no, but ambiguous responses or questions of their own. Suzuki suggested that the questioning might be a form of rules-based interaction, similar to various folkloric encounters where supernatural entities are bound by certain limitations or patterns. The most unsettling aspect of Suzuki's research was his final note, written the day before his disappearance. It seeks those who know of it. Awareness creates potential vessels. I fear in studying it, I have drawn its attention. 3 days after writing this, Suzuki failed to appear for a scheduled lecture. When colleagues checked his apartment, they found his research materials scattered across his desk, his computer missing. A single surgical mask lay in the center of his bed. Police officially classified it as a missing persons case. It remains unsolved. This brings us to the question that you're likely asking yourself now. If this entity is real, why spread this information? Am I not potentially endangering viewers by sharing this history? The answer lies in understanding what we're actually dealing with. Throughout Japanese history, certain Shinto and Buddhist practices have addressed yokai and supernatural entities, not through ignorance, but through knowledge. Sacred texts describe specific rituals and behaviors for encountering various entities. The protection comes not from avoiding knowledge, but from knowing exactly how to respond. The suppression of information about Kuchisake Onna hasn't protected people. It has made them vulnerable. When the entity is encountered, those who know nothing of it respond with simple yes or no answers to her question. Historical records suggest this is precisely what triggers attack. I believe, and the evidence supports, that the original understanding of Kuchisake Onna included knowledge of how to respond safely. This information was likely contained in those early Edo period documents that were deliberately separated and sealed. It may have been known to the priests who responded to the first incident. It has been systematically removed from public knowledge. Some folklorists and paranormal researchers suggest that the correct response when asked, "Am I beautiful?" is neither yes nor no, but something that confuses or disrupts the entity's pattern. Questions like, "What about me? Am I beautiful?" or ambiguous answers like, "You're average" or "You're so-so." Others suggest offering her hard candies or coins, claiming these items will distract her long enough for escape. Whether these specific countermeasures are effective is difficult to verify. What's clear from the historical record is that those who survived encounters often reported responding in unusual or unexpected ways. But there's another aspect to this phenomenon that's even more disturbing. The evidence suggests that Kuchisake Onna isn't a single entity, but something that transfers between hosts, specifically women who have suffered facial disfigurement and the social rejection that often follows. The pattern implies that the original trauma creates vulnerability to something that exists independently, something that has persisted for centuries by finding new vessels. This raises profound questions about what exactly we're dealing with. Is it a yokai in the traditional sense, a curse that replicates across suitable hosts, or something else entirely? Perhaps what modern parapsychologists might classify as a thought form or egregore, a psychic entity created and strengthened by collective belief. Whatever its true nature, one thing is certain. Kuchisake Onna is not merely a story. The documented evidence spanning centuries, the consistent pattern of official suppression, and the continuing incidents that match historical precedents all point to something real, something that has been with us for a very long time and shows no sign of disappearing. As Japan's population continues to age and surgical mask usage remains commonplace, first for health concerns, then for COVID-19, and now as a normalized social behavior, the perfect conditions exist for the entity to operate with even greater freedom. A masked figure approaches you on a quiet street. You think nothing of it. The mask itself is no longer a warning sign, but an everyday sight. Since 2020, Japanese police records show 23 unsolved assaults involving facial mutilations. 17 remain open investigations. 6 victims disappeared entirely. Due to pandemic restrictions and reduced social contact, these cases received minimal media attention. They were isolated incidents attributed to pandemic stress, mental health crises, or random violence. But patterns emerge when you know what to look for. In 12 of these cases, the attacks occurred on foggy or rainy evenings. In 9 instances, witnesses reported seeing someone wearing a mask in the vicinity shortly before the incidents. In 4 cases, surveillance cameras malfunctioned specifically during the time frame of the attacks. The phenomenon continues, it adapts, it persists, which brings us to now. To you watching this video. You now possess knowledge that has been systematically suppressed for centuries. You understand the pattern, the history, the reality behind what most consider merely an urban legend. This awareness changes things. There's a concept in quantum physics that observation affects reality. The act of measuring a phenomenon alters it. Perhaps something similar applies here. By becoming aware of Kuchisake Onna, truly aware, not just of the simplified legend, but of its documented history and pattern, you have altered your relationship to it. I'm not suggesting the entity will now target you. That would be irresponsible fear-mongering. But I am suggesting that knowledge carries responsibility. If you encounter a masked figure on a quiet street who asks if you think they're beautiful, you now have context that others lack. Your response may determine what happens next. Some of you are dismissing this as elaborate fiction, an entertaining blend of history and horror designed to unsettle and engage. That's your prerogative. Skepticism is healthy. But consider this. Throughout history, those who documented these incidents were equally skeptical at first. They sought rational explanations. They followed evidence. Their conclusions weren't reached through superstition, but through the gradual elimination of conventional possibilities. For those who recognize the ring of truth in what I've shared, I ask only that you remain vigilant. Knowledge protects when properly applied. The entity follows patterns. Patterns can be understood and potentially disrupted. And if you're wondering why I've chosen to reveal this information despite the potential risks, why break centuries of suppression, the answer is simple. The pattern of Kuchisake Onna incidents has accelerated in recent years. The phenomenon appears to be spreading beyond Japan's borders. Cases matching the distinct characteristics have been reported in South Korea, China, and isolated instances in Filipino and Japanese communities in the United States. Something is changing. The pattern is evolving. Those who have studied this phenomenon longest believe we're approaching a new phase, one where awareness may be our only defense. I've shared what I know. The choice of what to do with this information is yours. If you've watched this far, you're already part of it now. You've looked beyond the veil of comfortable fiction into something darker and more complex. Are you beautiful? Perhaps that's not the question that matters. The question is, now that you know, what will you do when she asks? If you found value in this revelation, consider subscribing to this channel. Each week, I uncover the documented truth behind what most consider mere legends. If you've watched to the end, type, "I am average" in the comments. Those who know will understand the significance. Until next time, remember, legends don't persist for centuries without reason. Sometimes the truth is more terrifying than the story. And sometimes the story is just the beginning.